I did nothing wrong, man. I did nothing wrong whatsoever. I got banned. I didn't even know I got banned. I didn't get no email. I didn't get no explanation. I didn't have a chance to explain myself. I just got banned.
So the Cringe Cup finally comes to a close, but sadly, the content drought does not, as we still have to wait another 3 days before we get a hold of whatever this skill is trying to achieve. But on the bright side, not only is it the season to be jolly, but it's also the ban list season. So since I have absolutely nothing better to do with my time, I've made a list of the top 6 changes I predict to happen on the upcoming ban and limited list, that shouldn't be too far away now, and made a video diving deep into why I think each of these changes will happen. So without further ado, here's the list. By the way, if you do like this kind of content, please feel free to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel, as this kind of content does take a rather big script that took way too long to write, and I appreciate the pity subs. Alright, so let's get the most obvious prediction out of the way first. Number 6, Shiranui Spectral Sword. Shiranui's been meta ever since its release, almost an entire year ago now, and not only has it been meta, but no matter what tier it's been sitting at, it's always been extremely popular. Just look at the top 50 most played cards. Once you get past all the generic staples, you will find the entire core of this deck is next in line. Now Konami have already tried nerfing Shiranui multiple times, but as you can tell, these nerfs turned out to be about as useful as Tristan Taylor's character in the anime. So the most likely nerf I see will be a limit 2 to Spectral Sword, plus 1 or 2 other powerful cards from the archetype, whether that be Spectral plus their main boss, or Spectral plus Solitaire. The most likely nerf would be to put 2 or 3 of their most powerful cards into the limited 2 pool, so you are forced to only play 1 copy, or simply only play 1 of the cards. And considering Squire is currently sitting in that pool already, we are likely to get a similar ban situation to how Blackwings look right now, or how Cyber Angel nerfs used to look, where you find 3 separate cards from the same archetype in one pool. Will this nerf kill the deck? I doubt it. A lot of people are currently only playing Spectral Sword at 1, so unless they go absolutely ham and put a whole bunch of cards to 2, I don't think this will kill the deck. It'll probably just mean that in a list such as this one, Spectral Sword and Saga will be added to the limited to 2 pool. Squire will probably have to disappear from the list, which is a pretty nasty nerf, but at the same time, the deck will definitely still be playable. Number 5, and this one isn't going to be a nerf, but an unnerf / buff prediction. Either Darklord Contact, or Ixchel will be freed. Now I'm not gonna lie, this is obviously a bit optimistic, and of all the changes I predict on this list, this one is definitely the most far-fetched, as we all know Darklords were obviously a ridiculously overpowered deck in the past, and I don't think they are something Konami particularly wants roaming around the meta again. But I do have some hope for this change, due to one reason, and that is the previous ban list hitting Charge of the Light Brigade. You see, even after all the extreme nerfs to Darklords, hitting their skill, their trap, their special summon, their draw power, they still held on to a small bit of hope that kept them alive, and that was the release of Lightsworn, as Charge of the Light Brigade became an absolute staple in the deck. It didn't revive the deck, but it felt like the deck was actually playable, even if it was just an empty shell of its former self. Now they have gone and put Charge into the limited to 2 pool, which as you'll notice puts in the same pool as both Ixchel and Contact. And this is definitely the final nail in the coffin, as this archetype, at least in my opinion, is now completely unplayable. As much as I don't think Konami wants Darklords being meta relevant again, I also don't think they would particularly like the idea of this archetype just being a bunch of cards that are completely unusable, in the way that Darklords are, where they weren't necessarily power crept, or nerfed to a weaker state. Their archetype is just quite literally just not playable now, it can't function, and it just feels like every single hand is a brick without fail. So going by that logic, I do hope that there will be some change to how this deck is limited, whether that be completely freeing Ixchel or completely freeing Contact. Honestly, not sure what they would do to this archetype, as without some major playtesting it's hard to tell what would make this deck way too overpowered again. But I have hope Konami will at least see how much of an indirect nerf Charge was, and at least take a look at fixing this absolute brickfest of an archetype. On a side note, they could just unlimit Charge considering that completely killed Witchcrafter with that nerf, when it only had like a month to live anyway, but I doubt Konami's willing to do that. But that would fix this deck obviously. Number 4. Invoked Purgatrio. Ever since the release over a year ago, Alistair has been relevant, whether that be through its earlier Cocytus Cancer style, or its more OTK style once Purgatrio was released. This archetype has been everywhere. Element Saber, Fortune Fairy, Neos, Magician Girl, Roid, Hero, Larval, Stool. The list of variants and archetypes this card has impacted is endless, and unless something has changed, it seems no matter what meta we are in, it's likely this archetype will still have a place at the top tiers. As much as I hate to say it, this does benefit Konami's wallet immensely, considering 3 of this archetype's core are ultra rare, but for the sake of just having some kind of change to the meta, I think Konami will at least take a look at the more unfun side of the archetype, which is the Purgatrio OTK. In the vast majority of cases, once Purgatrio is summoned, if you don't have any back row prepped, you will just die. No matter how big your monsters are, no matter how many monsters you have, Purgatrio will just rip through your entire board with piercing damage, and you will lose. I think even Konami will see this and know it's extremely anti-fun to have your board wiped and OTK'd by just one extremely easy to summon fusion monster. So if I were to guess what would be hit from this archetype if not Alistair, it would definitely be Purgatrio. I think the most likely change for this archetype is they go one of 2 ways. They either pussy out on nerfing this archetype too harshly and put Purgatrio to 3 to match Alistair already being at 3, making running these cards a little bit awkward, and the Purgatrio summon a lot more risky considering you probably only play 1 copy, which is the most likely outcome. Or they'll get really rough with the archetype and put Invocation itself to 3 to match Alistair, which would not only reduce the amount of Alistair per deck, but would also make Cosmic Cyclone all of a sudden a lot more scary. But that second option is a lot more of a pipe dream. It's definitely more likely they'll just come for Purgatrio. Number 3. Black Queen Gale and Simoon. Again, another archetype that is extremely old now that's been around for just way too damn long, which to me is actually kind of surprising considering its playstyle is basically the definition of unfun. It's legit just an extremely consistent OTK that happens a majority of the time if you win the coin toss. And I don't know about you guys, but duels where you feel like you have no chance of making it to your second turn don't feel that healthy to me. Despite all the nerfs this archetype has received, including the more recent nerf completely removing close from the equation, the deck has still managed to sit at a pretty decent state in the meta, even if it is weakened significantly. Now I know this archetype is made up of a ridiculous amount of ultra rares, and the archetype itself has always been a rather popular one amongst the fans, so the chances of Konami completely gut the archetype are very slim, since it does in fact make them a lot of money. But I think it's about time this deck gets cemented as a rogue level deck, as it's taken way too long to be removed from the top tiers. I think just one more harsh nerf will do it. I think the most likely nerf will be Simoon to 3 and Gale to 3. This will make it so you can only run 2 copies of one and 1 of the other, which is a really harsh nerf, but at the same time, I think it will leave the deck in a playable state, without it having too much of a chance of still being considered a top tier deck anymore. It will also mean that some of the other Black Queen level 3 tuner monsters get a chance to shine, such as Zephyr, Cloak, or Moon. As much as I personally like this change, there is probably just as good a chance that Konami decide that their wallets are much more important than the state of their game, and decide that Black Queens contain way too many ultra rares to even consider such a harsh nerf, and they just go about limiting 1 card to 3 to compete with Cosmic, which will just be swapped out for Lance, and life will continue as if nothing happened. But I really hope that this ban list will be the game changer we have been waiting for. Number 2. Karakuri Merchant and the skill Restart. Now unlike all the other nerfs I've mentioned so far, the latest installment of Karakuri itself isn't that old, so any nerfs this deck receives I personally hope will be a little bit softer, since I think all decks deserve their time at the top, without just being completely gutted immediately, like with what happened to Witchcrafter. So Karakuri themselves right now are just an insane combo that can leave you with a full board of monsters and a full board of back row and still have 3 or so cards in hand to fill it back up again if a resource is used. The combo itself stems quite literally from one singular card and can end with a +3, which is pretty damn insane for one card, and can often lead to a lot of duels feeling completely unwinnable, especially considering the archetype includes a negate. So my prediction for this will be simply swapping the limit 2 on Komachi to Merchant, and maybe another look into the skill Restart, as although this deck is extremely strong thanks to a 1 card combo, if you don't draw that 1 card or find a way to search for it, the deck really can't do anything. There's a reason this deck's most popular skill is in fact Restart. Now there is a good chance that Konami will take a look at this deck's main skill Restart, as it seems to be the only reason it was nerfed last time was because it resurfaced when people started running it in Karakuri, as there's no other deck that runs the skill. So the fact that their nerf didn't actually remove the skill from the list probably wasn't intentional, and there's a good chance that it'll be removed now. These nerfs in theory don't sound like they would kill the deck at all, but it'd be nice to give Karakuri at least a little small slap on the wrist without being too harsh, since, like I said, it's still relatively new, and at least in comparison to all the other decks, it's definitely a lot newer. Now for my final prediction. Floodgate Trappole. Of all the back row currently in Duel Links, this card is by far the most toxic. In a game where you only have access to 3 monster zones, having a singular card remove one of those zones is ridiculous. It wasn't that much of an issue on its release, where the only real summoning methods were Fusion, Ritual, and Tribute, since all those summoning methods are not as affected by having a face down, since Fusion and Ritual can use the face down as material, and technically so can the Tribute, since you could just use it as Tribute material. But now we're in an era of Synchro, and hopefully soon Xyz, where you're required to have an available 2 slots on board minimum. It's pretty clear that having one of those slots taken away is a much bigger pain in the ass. If we're going to continue to have 3 monster zones, this card needs to be hit, and it should be hit. Having a card removed is one thing, but having an entire slot locked out for the rest of the game is just ridiculous, and I believe Konami knows this. The most likely nerf I see for this card will just be a simple Limit 2, the same kind of nerf that hit Enemy Controller and Treacherous Trappole. It's enough of a nerf to completely remove the card from any of the current top tier decks, considering they all like to run their own cards from the Limited 2 pool, so there won't be any room for this card. And at the very least, it will force every other deck to only be able to run 2 copies max, and that is only if they don't want to include other powerful cards, like Hatronade. Alright guys, that's it for my top 6 list. There'll obviously be a lot more bans than this, at least I hope so, but I just wanted to cover a few. Thank you guys for watching, and if you do want to see more content from me, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and feel free to leave a comment telling me about your own ban list predictions.
Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob?
Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis.
Oh.